Hello, everybody. I am on the phone with director Joe Swanberg, director of the film Drinking Buddies, which is going to show at the Indie Film Fest here very soon. And thank you, Joe, for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So, Joe, you're a friend of the IU Cinema. You were down here last year showing off some of your films, and we really appreciated that. And thanks for joining us for this interview.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not too far from Chicago, so it's nice to be able to get down there.
Yeah, and I think there's probably going to be some events coming up this fall, from what I hear, that are going to be very enticing.
Yes, fun things are in the works.
Yeah.
Sure.
So, Drinking Buddies is a film that I saw at South by Southwest, and it was my absolute favorite film of the festival. And I just had to tell everyone about it, and I'm really excited that it's going to be playing at the Indie Film Fest. So, just very briefly, give me a sort of synopsis of the film for our viewers.
Sure. Well, thanks, firstly. That's very nice to hear that you liked it so much. It is... So Olivia Wilde and Jake Johnson play Kate and Luke, two friends in Chicago that work at a brewery together. And they have one of these very fun, flirty work relationships, but they're both in significant relationships with other people. So the film is sort of about navigating those boundaries between, your work life and your home life, and then also, you're trying to figure out when you're in a relationship, if there's somebody else who's kind of appealing to you, how to navigate that. The fact that they work in a brewery obviously means that there's a lot of drinking and fun and revelry that sort of helps to complicate the blurring of these kinds of lines.
Yes. So if you're listening to that and you think it sounds like a standard rom-com, trust me, it's quite a bit deeper than that. So I think most people, Joe, when they think of your films, if they're familiar with them, they think very low budget, sort of not name actors, but you've got Olivia Wilde, Jake Johnson, Ron Livingston, Anna Kendrick, Jason Sudeikis is also in this film. So what made you think this is a movie for me to use sort of these established actors rather than, the sort of lesser known actors that are normally in your films?
Yeah. There were two movies that kind of served as inspiration to get the ball rolling. I'll admit to having a biased notion of, what was possible once you kind of entered the world of bigger budgets and name actors. I without having been there, I just sort of assumed that you had to forfeit a lot of control and that, you kind of lost the ability to make a certain kind of movie. And so, I had hesitated for a long time. After Hannah Takes the Stairs came out, I was sort of offered, I was courted by agents and there were people interested in trying to do bigger projects with me. And I was already busy working on the next film and was really enjoying the way that I was working and the level that I was working at. So I sort of put all that stuff off and spent a couple more years doing really low-budget things with friends of mine. And I sort of circled back around and I saw the Paul Mazursky movie, Bob and Carol and Ted and Alice, and then also Elaine May's original The Heartbreak Kid, the one with Charles Grodin in it. Mm-hmm. And both of those films were kind of a kick in the butt for me to think about doing something that was, quote unquote commercial or accessible in a different kind of way, and also still being able to make a complicated, interesting relationship movie for adults, Mm-hmm. Those movies are obviously coming at the tail end of the 60s and early 70s, which was a very different time for, filmmaking and especially American filmmakers. But the independent world that we live in right now in terms of filmmaking is actually really as exciting to me as that time period. And I feel like there are more opportunities, not fewer, to do interesting, complicated films. And I think that there's a desire from Hollywood actors to work outside of that system and to do cool movies. So all of these things were sort of swirling in my head as I started to think about putting the project together, and it just was a matter of having to stick to my guns in terms of how I wanted to make the movie and what I wanted it to be about, and then finding investors and actors that were all on the same page. And that was a challenge, and that took a little while, but once we got there, the making of the film was incredibly fun, and it was all the walls that I expected to run up against weren't there, and in fact, I found that the bigger budget and the bigger name actors and the increased infrastructure surrounding the production was really liberating and fun, and coming from the micro budget world where typically I did everything myself. Directing, producing, editing, writing, craft services, wardrobe, picking people up. Every job sort of fell on my shoulders. It was really nice actually to wake up every day and come to set and have my only job be directing and working with the actors. I rather than feel like I was letting go of something or losing control of something, I just felt that all the other jobs were in totally capable hands, and I was able, for the first time, to really focus, and I loved it. It was a great experience.
Great. So I know you described your process, at least for a couple of your films when you're here at the cinema, as sort of very loosely structured. You kind of come in with an idea of what the scene is going to be and where it's going to go, and maybe an A and B point, and you don't necessarily have like a hard and fast script with lines and whatnot. Did you keep that process for this film, or did you have to change it?
No, I kept it. It ended up having to be more written because we needed to schedule the film out ahead of time, and I needed to be able to communicate with the art department and the wardrobe department, and we had to schedule the movie. There were just a lot of sort of infrastructural necessities that required me to put more on paper than I typically would. But, I didn't write any dialogue, and the sort of 45-page script that I wrote, the actors never even saw it. It was an internal document that,
Sure.
that kind of helped us on the production end. But, the way that I work with the actors was pretty much exactly the same as I always have. We would show up every day, we'd have a brief conversation about the scene, and we'd start trying it out and working on it from there,
Yeah. How did sort of the established actors used to working with scripts and, all that stuff deal with this process? How did they adapt?
They were great. What's interesting to me about the way that we use actors, and this is often complicated by the actors themselves enjoying this, but we typically take these people and we ask them to disappear into roles that have been previously written.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of actors are really good at that, and I think that a lot of actors appreciate that challenge of being given pre-existing character, and then their job is to make that real or sort of inhabit that. But the way that I've always worked is to try and take the things that I like about the people that I'm working with, that I'm like drawn to or attracted to about these people as people, and then try and get that into the movie, And so the improvised approach that I use is really just the quickest way that I've found to take all the sort of human qualities about the people I'm collaborating with and try my best to get the most of that into the finished product. And so working with these actors was great because, they're the best at what they do. They're the people have chosen them. They're famous and they're well known and they're well liked.
Mm-hmm.
They're people who have a quality about them that almost everybody responds to.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was extra fun to try and get that stuff into the movie. To take these four really intelligent, smart, fun, cool people and give them a ton of freedom to be themselves within the confines of these fictitious characters that we sort of created.
Sure. So you had talked about sort of the process of having to find everyone who was on board, investors and actors included. How did you sort of decide these actors? Did you sort of target them specifically, or how did you work them? How did you get all these people into the film?
Yeah, well, Jake was the first guy to come on, and he was recommended by somebody who had worked with him on New Girl.
Mm-hmm.
And so he and I got breakfast and sort of talked about doing a movie together. And over the course of a couple months while we were looking for money, he and I kind of kept that conversation going via email and occasional phone calls. And Anna Kendrick was somebody who was also at CAA, who, our agents sort of wanted to put us in touch with each other. I had seen her in 50/50 and thought she was amazing. That was actually, I hadn't seen Up in the Air yet. 50/50 was all I knew her from, but she totally blew me away in that movie.
Yeah.
And so I was really excited to talk to her, and she was interested in, we've worked together since, and she's just a really, sort of ballsy actor. She doesn't seem to me intimidated by anything, any working process or anything. And then, I didn't find this out until afterwards, but Jason Sudeikis is actually the one who recommended Olivia, or sort of suggested to her that she might want to try something like this. And she said at South by Southwest at the Q&A that, he heard first that I was doing a movie and sort of, put on a little Joe Swanberg film festival in their apartment just to introduce her to my movies. So she got in touch, and I had seen her in Alpha Dog several years ago, and she was always somebody who I was interested in and sort of wanted to work with and suspected would be really good. And in the meantime, she had just done such huge Hollywood movies that I just thought that, she was kind of out of the range of people that I could reach out to for one of my movies. So when I found out that she was interested, we jumped on the phone together and had a great conversation. And and then Ron Livingston just sort of came through the casting process. I worked with Mark Bennett, who cast The Hurt Locker and Zero Dark 30 and some really great movies. And so Mark, Mark really put me in touch with a ton of great people, including setting up the meetings with Olivia and Ron, who were both just people that I really connected with. And so it was really fun, it was a cool process to meet with actors for a movie that there was no script for, They were just sort of taking the meetings on faith, and I ended up having great conversations. And some of the people that I met with for Drinking Buddies who I didn't end up casting in Drinking Buddies, I've then gone back and get in touch with, and we'll figure out other movies to work on with,
Very cool.
Yeah, it was, I had no gauge of whether the industry, the sort of LA industry knew of my work at all. So the process of casting Drinking Buddies was also a process of sort of sussing out who had been paying attention to the mumblecore stuff and who was interested in it, and it was surprising to me how many people had seen Hannah Takes the Stairs, or at least knew what it was, and going forward, now that Drinking Buddies exist, that will obviously be an easier process.
Oh, definitely. So I found the storyline of this film, there's so much to like about this film, but I thought the sort of the journey these characters take was really fascinating and really well done. How did you kind of, how much did this change over time to get to that final product? Did you have earlier ideas that you had to drop, or did you always have sort of the sort of form of this idea right up front?
No, I did. I definitely had earlier ideas. I tried that we ended up not using, and that I kicked around for a little while. A lot of that got worked out with Jake, via emails and story conversations and stuff. But yeah, the sort of initial version that I was talking to, early actors about, months before we ended up shooting was, the bones of the story were there. The character, these two relationships were there, but, there were some very different places that it would go to. And we just sort of kept honing in. And then my producer, Alicia Van Koovering, also ended up doing a lot of quote unquote writing on the movie. Once she came on as a producer, then she and I took the story that Jake and I had been talking about and sort of tried to flesh it out. And as we looked for investors, we kind of needed to put a pitch together. Mm-hmm. And, by the time we got to set, the story was certainly worked out. Nothing changed during production. But on a day-to-day basis, the scenes would be different than I maybe imagined them based on what the actors ended up doing with it. And so then you sort of integrate that stuff and sort of start figuring out what the actual tone of the movie is. But it felt loose and free in the way that I wanted it to, but also really nicely structured, so that I wasn't like pulling my hair out every night trying to figure out what we were going to do the next day.
Yeah, definitely. So let's talk about these individual characters because they all bring something very interesting to the table. So the way you set it up initially, you have Anna Kendrick and Jake Johnson in a relationship, Olivia Wilde and Ron Livingston in a relationship. So let's talk about Ron Livingston first. His character is really interesting because he's almost playing the grown-up, right?
Yeah.
Like everyone else is sort of having this fun, sort of free, whatever. We're just not taking life too seriously. He's like the grown-up. How did you sort of decide on that particular sort of role for him?
Well, that character sprang out of Olivia's character first because, I had just sort of observed that, oftentimes characters like Olivia's who, she's like really good looking. She's got a cool job. She's super confident. I've noticed in my life that often with a character like that, like guys her own age would be really intimidated by her, mm-hmm. and that she would tend to date slightly older guys who, were sort of a little less in awe of her kind of presence and dynamicness. And so, I started thinking about who she would sort of be dating, and I thought that he would be a little older, he'd have a little bit of money, and he would have had his own successes, Mm-hmm. And so we hit on the idea of this record producer, somebody who is still part of the cool scene in Chicago, who would have been around her at beer tastings and maybe bumped into her at cool events, record store events or other things where she might have been there doing tastings or sort of representing the brewery. He's kind of over the party lifestyle, he did a lot of that, and now he, sort of lives a quieter existence. It's appealing to her as a sort of oasis from the party lifestyle that she's now participating in,
Yeah.
With her job at the brewery. So, I sort of pictured him as this kind of like sanctuary for her. She works around all these dudes and is sort of in this very kind of boys' world, drinking, partying sort of thing. And then she goes to his place and he's reading good books and listening to good music and is just comfortable, sort of confidently comfortable. Mm-hmm. And it's a tricky role to play. Ron does a really amazing job with it. He's really smart. The man, Ron Livingston, Mm-hmm. And so we had some great emails and conversations about who we thought this guy was and also why it was appealing to him to be dating somebody younger, some sort of immaturities on his part too, and some maybe some relationship mistakes he's been making along the way as he's been trying to figure some of this stuff out.
Yeah, and he has all these great little character touches, like the picnic scene where he has like wine glasses at a picnic. You know, it's not paper cups; he's got actual wine glasses there. That sort of told me everything I needed to know about that character in kind of one little moment. So let's talk about Anna Kendrick for a second. She also has a really tough role playing the person that's sort of in the way of the relationship that, you know, you're sort of setting up the audience to root for.
Yeah.
So how did you sort of talk to her about that and work out how can she stay likable? Because she comes out at the end of the film, you feel pretty good about her character still.
Yeah. You know, we based Jake and Anna's characters in the movie are pretty heavily based on my wife and I at a point in our relationship before we were married. You know, when we'd been together for a lot of years, but we're still technically just boyfriend and girlfriend. And so, you know, I wanted her to be a counterbalance to Jake's sort of fun, rascally kind of good time guy. You know, she's a teacher. She's certainly way more stable than he is. She's taken their apartment and done a nice job decorating and designing it. You know, she's put together in a way that, you know, only Ron's character is sort of similarly put together, but he's also, you know, maybe 10 years older, 15 years older than her. So she's kind of at a young age matured, you know, beyond sort of where her boyfriend is. And so it's tricky because, you know, she does in the beginning sort of have to come off a little bit like a stick in the mud, you know. But, you know, hopefully over the course of the movie, she's, you know, it does her justice in terms of recognizing why she's become the way she has in terms of the relationship and who she's dating, but also in terms of the kinds of insecurities that she's dealing with also in trying to be with this, like, super fun, charming guy who works at a brewery and who's also, you know, she's like trying to create space for him to be himself, but also then trying to be realistic about whether their relationship has a future.
So let's talk about the chemistry between Jake Johnson and Olivia Wilde. It's just absolutely unreal how perfectly they work together. How did you guys develop that on screen? I mean, it's the highlight of this movie and probably many other movies, to be quite honest.
Yeah. They, you know, we had to get there quickly. I mean, we got lucky in the fact that Jason Sudeikis and some other comedians do a charity thing in Kansas City every year, and they had invited Jake out for it. And so, you know, right around the time that they both signed on to do the movie, they ran into each other at this thing in Kansas City. So they got to spend a day before we technically started pre-production, hanging out and just goofing around and drinking, which was great. You know, they both knew that they were going to be in the movie together. So that was a lucky coincidence. So when they got to Chicago, they already kind of knew each other, which was great. But, you know, we had to, it's part of my job as a director to try and create an atmosphere on set that allows them to be comfortable and, you know, create that kind of intimacy and that fun relationship. But then a lot of times it's just, you know, getting good luck with chemistry, you know, I mean, a feeling of a natural kind of easy chemistry that, you know, often just ends up having to feel forced in movies, because you don't have enough time to develop it or because the actors just don't have it. But I mean, they're both great, you know, I mean, it's just, it doesn't hurt at all that they're both individually super fun to hang out with, really funny, and fun to be around. And then the combined effect of the two of them together is just like great fun to watch. But I got to experience and have the thrill of experiencing it myself because it's improvised. So I don't know what they're going to say, So while we're shooting, I just get to sit there and watch it unfold the same way you get to when you watch the movie,
Mm-hmm.
And then in the editing room, I just have to make the right choices which of the great moments make it into the movie, and which sort of help tell the story. But I had a wealth of amazing material, tons of stuff that I could have put in there because every take was really fun in its own way,
Yeah. So I'm going to say something that's going to sound hyperbolic, but I really mean it. I think this film is Olivia Wilde's best role. This is the best work she's ever done. I'm quite certain of it. You rarely see anyone play sort of the vulnerability and the longing that she plays, especially in the moving sequence.
Mm-hmm.
That whole sequence, it's a powerhouse, How did you guys work on that particular sequence? Because that's really sort of the key to the whole film.
Yeah. Well, I worked with the producers to really try and schedule the movie as chronological as possible so that, we would all kind of be on the journey together while we were shooting it and that we could, build up to these things. But it doesn't end up being the case that that's possible all the time, So we ended up having to do that sequence earlier in the shoot than I would have liked to. And it's a credit to Olivia that after about a week of shooting with Jake, she was already ready to go to these places,
Mm-hmm.
And, it helps that she's really smart and perceptive in her as a person. She's, I didn't have to explain much to her. She got the character right away and was excited to play, not the kind of typical, we really tried to make a movie that was, at every point based in reality, not the tropes of the romantic comedy genre.
Absolutely.
So she had the freedom to go there, whereas, often it's not that the actors aren't able to, it's that the movies don't create the space for them to go to these places. It's not the kind of entertainment they're trying to create.
Mm-hmm.
So, she's been saying that it's her favorite movie that she's done too. It makes me feel really great
Mm-hmm.
about the movie and about her performance in it. I think she's really good too,
Mm-hmm.
But I think a lot of this stuff, I think if like 90% of the actors in Hollywood were given the space to do great work, they probably could,
Mm-hmm.
But it's hard. You're trying to make a living and balance different kinds of projects. You don't want to do the same thing over and over. And there are all these other kind of career factors that come into play for actors that don't necessarily allow them to just do big strings in a row of really good movies.
Yeah.
So, and often all your best attempts at making a good movie can result in not a good movie. That happens all the time,
Sure.
So there's like a little bit of weird black magic involved of just, having to cross your fingers and hope that this one's going to be good. Everybody's certainly trying their best to make it good. And, it all kind of combined really nicely. And additionally, Drinking Buddies is benefiting from the fact that that Olivia hasn't done anything like this before, or at least not in a while, not since maybe she was first starting out. So, we're getting to play against type in a way that like the next really good, cool movie she does people won't be like, oh my God, where is this coming from?
Yeah.
In a way now they're going to expect it.
Yeah.
So there's like the just luck of the draw in terms of this being, an actress who clearly has the talents and abilities to shine like this just not having had a chance to exercise them before. So,
Yeah.
but it's all really exciting. I mean, I think she's great. And, like, you know, she's an actor who I wish, who I wanted all along the way to be seeing in really great movies. And she often ended up in these really big, not that the movies were bad, but in these really big movies where she wasn't the central character.
Yeah.
And so I hope over the next couple of years, she'll have, like, 10 more opportunities to really do really cool things.
Definitely. So I got to ask you one more question, then we'll get out of here. Without revealing sort of how this all wraps up, all of your movies that I've seen sort of end with a perfect little wrap-up scene that kind of puts a button on the whole thing. And that's really challenging for apparently every other director right now. So many movies go on for like 20 minutes too long. Your movies always end with like a little like minute-long scene that just kind of perfectly wraps up the film. And this one does as well. How do you manage to do that? Is that just a discipline thing that you just go in thinking, I got to get to the point where I can end this movie?
Maybe. I don't know. I mean, I care a lot about it, and I feel that it's hugely important. I mean, your kind of opening scene and your final scene are just by default going to be big artistic moments for your movie. That's just that's going to be what people are thinking about as they leave the theater. So I think a lot about it. It's really always an important thing for me to make sure that I'm ending the movie with something visually that I'm proud of and that feels strong, But beyond that, with the way that I've been working and with the improv and the sort of amount of collaboration and freedom that I'm giving the actors, I can't fine-tune these moments. I just have to try and recognize them when they come. So it's not necessarily we sit down to shoot a scene and I'm like, okay, this is going to be the final scene. There's a lot of pressure. You got to have this really nice moment. It's got to work. All these things have to work. It's just that we shoot a scene and then it's like definitely clear to me that is the final scene. It's like after we film it. So with Drinking Buddies, I won't get into any specifics other than to say the final shot in the movie was not in the script. The final shot in the movie, it just the second I called cut on it, everybody looked at each other and it was abundantly clear that should be how we end the movie.
Yeah.
And that's happened to me a few other times too, where like occasionally I'll have an idea. Like this film Silver Bullets that I did,
Yep.
That was actually my lead actress Kate Shields' idea, but it was an idea that we had early in the process of like this would be a great final shot. But a lot of times it's way more coincidental than that, and something really nice and magical happens on camera, and then I just decide to end the movie there.
Yeah.
It's one of the nice things about cinema that's different from television and other art forms. You do get to make that decision, and it's not a cliffhanger leading to the next season. It's just that's the end, and the movie doesn't have to start or end anywhere. It's always an arbitrary decision. And so to sort of capitalize on some of your stronger scenes by putting them at the beginning and the end always feels right to me.
Yeah. Well, Joe, thank you so much for talking to me. I really appreciate it. I'm a big fan of your work, and Drinking Buddies, I think, definitely my favorite film of yours. I haven't seen all your films, so I don't know if I can say it's your best, but it's definitely my favorite of your films. But Thursday, July 18th at 7:30 p.m. at the Indiana Museum of Art, the Indie Film Fest. And you'll be down for that, correct?
I will. I'll be there, and I'll do a Q&A after the movie, and then we'll all go get some really good beer at Sun King.
Excellent. So that'll be happening. Tickets are on sale now at indiefilmfest.org. Joe, thanks so much again. Hope we see you at the cinema again soon.
Sounds great. See you there.
A Place for Film is recorded at WFIU Studios in Bloomington, Indiana.